Thank you, everyone, for coming here. So I'll start off with a brief background just to set the context for the conversation. So in the last couple of years, we have seen a resurgence in great power rivalry. We have seen the gains made since the Second World War in global trade start to fade. Global capital flows, which are also a mirror image of trade flows, there are now big question marks. We are starting to see people question the steady decline in inflation, which was caused by improving efficiency in global trade, and what that means is cost of capital, what that means for risk appetite in the world. This is where perhaps G20 has a very big role to play. Just to set context, in the last 400 years, every 80 to 100 years, we have seen new treaties, new contours being agreed to by the great powers, right? So this started with the 1648 Peace of Westphalia, 1711, the Treaty of Utrecht, then the Congress of Vienna in 1815, and which lasted, which created long-lasting peace for a while. Since 1945, we've had one world order, and clearly this is time now to create the next one. What is also very interesting and important is that when these new world orders are being created, it is never the largest powers in the world which actually lead this creation. It is not because they're too much in conflict. For example, the Congress of Vienna in 1814 was hosted by Austria, which was a minor power, which was 1/4 the size of the population of Great Britain at that time. And that brings us to India. This is clearly India's moment in the sun. I think India is one of the few powers which is trusted by everyone. It is a leader of the global south. It is seen as a country which does not have any biases towards or against the US or China. And the G20 presidency and the G20 forum is clearly a great forum to create the next world order. So in this context, I'll start with a very open-ended question, Mr. Kant. How do you see India's presidency shaping the contours of how the world engages amongst itself in the next decade or so?
So Neelkanth, first of all, we must realize that the world is going through several crises. There's a geopolitical crisis in Europe. The Russia-Ukraine war is leading to a scenario where Europe is going to increasingly become uncompetitive. You have a global debt crisis. 75 countries in the world today are facing a debt crisis. You have a post-COVID crisis. You have 200 million people who've gone below the poverty line. Over about 100 million people have lost their jobs in the world today. You have a climate action crisis, and you have the crisis of food, fuel, fertilizer. I mean, you're not able to move food from Ukraine. Fertilizer is not moving, and if you're not able to move fertilizer, next year you'll have a major food crisis. So the world will be confronted with a very major crisis on food and for fuel and fertilizer. And you've seen the rising energy prices for Europe. Germany is buying energy at about 3x of what it was buying. So we are in the midst of a whole range of crises. And also 1/3 of the world is in recession right now. Important to understand this. India takes over the presidency in the midst of all these global crises. Now, every crisis is an opportunity, actually, and much will depend on how we lead this G20. And G20 is important because the United States has become unworkable. I mean, the way, first of all, it's a very large, unwieldy body of 186 nations, but the way it's structured is that it's operated through the Security Council, which comprises the veto power of the 5 large nations. Now, if one of the large nations is at war, then how do you operate the Security Council? And therefore, the United Nations has come to a stop it's functioning. It's failed to play a key and a critical role in a moment of a war. And therefore, when leaders of the world get together in G20, it's a moment when leaders should look to find solution for many of these crises. And hopefully, as the Prime Minister said, India's presidency will be very inclusive, it will be action-oriented, it will be decisive and very outcome-oriented. So let's hope that we are able to drive that. This requires a lot of hard work. This requires a lot of building up of relationship. But we are very hopeful that we'll be able to drive on several of these fronts as we move forward. I think this is a challenge not merely for India, this is a challenge for the world today, and the world needs to get together to reshape it.
Oh, thank you, and absolutely, and I think there is a crisis, but there's also an opportunity to shape India's position and, of course, how the world coordinates its actions in the next decade. What would be the priority? So there are many fronts on which there are problems, right? So there is a problem of food, there's a problem of energy, there's a problem of financing. What would be our priorities?
To my mind, before the leadership of the world today, or G20, and G20 is important because G20 comprises of about 85% of the global GDP. We call it G20, but it's actually 19 plus 1, which is Europe. So it's actually 43 countries. So it's 85% of the global GDP. It's 78% of the global trade. It's 2/3 of the population. That's G20. Now, to my mind, the first and foremost challenge before the leadership of the world today is to drive inclusive, resilient, sustainable growth on a long-term manner. If you're not able to drive growth, you will not be able to do many things. You will not be able to find adequate resources to improve learning outcomes and health outcomes of people who've gone below poverty line. You need to put in a lot of resources. You are midway through the 2030 SDG goals. Instead of progressing, the world has regressed. So you need, because of COVID, and therefore you need to accelerate the pace of sustainable development goals. Humankind is almost on the verge of extinction if you're not able to meet 1.5 degrees centigrade. Now that's a huge, huge challenge for the world. You need to find the developed world, which had committed to providing about $100 billion per dollar for the emerging markets in 2009 at Copenhagen, has not lived up to that commitment. So you need to drive that, but more important than anything else, I think you need to restructure the multilateral institutions, and this is all about multilateralism. Both World Bank and IMF were formed in the post-Bretton Woods, post-World War II period. They were configured to face the reality of World War II. They're not confronted with the challenges of today. Today's challenges is about providing adequate resources for climate finance, and that would mean a lot, also finances for sustainable development goals. That they're used to direct lending. They are not used to blended finance. They are not used to credit enhancement. They are not used to first loss guarantees, which can enable you to do 15x more lending than what World Bank and IMF do today. So you will need a restructuring of these multilateral financial institutions over a long period of time. And that is critical for the world. I mean, these are things which are doable. A lot of these things are doable within this year's presidency.
No, that brings me to, so let me then, over the course of the next few questions, drill down into each of these. So clearly, climate finance, as I was talking to one of the trade negotiators, and they said that, look, if you have large powers which are ready to pounce on each other, it is important to find things that everyone agrees on. And I think one of the few things everyone agrees on is that there is a climate problem, right? There may be fringe groups in a few places which don't agree on that, but now, what can we do? So one of the things is, and I saw a very pleasant change recently, that some in the West are now starting to accept responsibility for the carbon that has already been emitted in the last 200 years. So going forward, how do we accelerate the process of creating a climate fund or maybe creating new institutions if the current ones cannot? So end of this year, so suppose we are in December and we are, and Brazil is the president, what would you see as having been India's achievement in pushing forward with the funding problem in climate finance?
So if you were to look at 1.5 degrees centigrade, the total carbon space available to the world is about 2,400 gigatons. The developed world has been responsible for consuming about 91% of it. India's consumption is just about 1.7%. Logically, India is entitled to about 17.5% of that carbon space on a per capita income basis. We've consumed only 1.7%. But irrespective of that, because as we industrialize, we are going to, if we go the normal way, we are going to carbonize the world, and the world doesn't have adequate carbon space. So India needs to be the first country in the world to industrialize without carbonizing. That's the challenge for India. Now, this would mean that many of the emerging markets need to follow a totally different strategy of development, and I think there's a huge merit in doing that. There's a merit because the world is, your values will go up, of both countries and of companies, your values will go up. You will be able to attract capital as you go ahead by being a green company. So the two things which every company must do and every country must do is to go digital, which India has done, and to go green, which India is doing. So India is one country which has achieved its NDC targets 9 years ahead of schedule as far as renewable is concerned. It's come out with a green hydrogen policy. And green hydrogen is critical for the world because even if we do 100% electricity on renewable, it's just 20% of energy. Balance is all refinery, you pollute through refineries, you pollute through steel, you pollute through transportation, you pollute through fertilizer. Those need to be decarbonized, and the only way is to bring green hydrogen to decarbonize all that. Now, what to my mind needs to be done during India's presidency is that it's not that there is a shortage of capital in the world. There are very vast pools of resources available in the world. And the world is sitting on huge assets, huge liquidity. They are not able to lend in with a multiplier impact because there is no agency which can do blended finance. There's no agency which can do credit enhancement. And World Bank only specializes in doing direct lending. So if they were to do blended finance, or if they have an institution called MEGA, which they don't utilize very effectively, but if they were to use MEGA, you can do credit enhancement and do 15x lending of that. So use the pool of resources with World Bank to do 15x lending for SDGs. These institutions need to become institutions for climate finance and for SDG. That is the challenge. The other is what the Prime Minister has talked about very strongly is about behavioral change. It's about nudging. What the Nobel Prize winners about nudging theory is that it's not countries, from COP1 to COP27, they are all talking shops. Nothing has been delivered. So if you look at the developed world, they talk about 2050, then in 2049, they'll talk about 2080, nothing will get delivered because they're talking long term. You need to deliver on short term. And short term will not happen through countries, it will happen through individual behavioral change. So behavioral change is critical, and a new form of development. You need an accelerated pace of circular economy. You need new forms of urbanization, which is based on cycling and walking, and on public transportation. You need a new form of driving, a whole range of new models of growth, which are very critical for the world. So we are looking at 5 or 6 principles around which we need to drive this. Financing is one pattern, one aspect of it. The other is about circular economy. The third is about life. The fourth is, there are several components to it on many of our working tracks so that we are able to get the world to think in terms of green development. And that is what we are looking at, really.
Oh, thank you. So going to the other SDGs, say let's start with health or education. So clearly on climate finance, because it pinches the wallets of the developed world, they have to commit to larger sums of money or cede control in some way of the Bretton Woods institutions to the emerging powers. But there are simpler issues of, say, technology transfer, like, the massive challenges.
So I just wanted to say that even without ceding control, I mean, structural reforms may take a long time, may not happen during India. But there are certain things which the US Treasury Secretary is talking about, for instance. She's saying that the World Bank needs to restructure itself. There's an incentive to the staff for doing direct lending. You need to move away from direct lending. That can be done without a structural reform. There are simpler ways of doing that.
Agreed. No, that's an important point. And so similarly, during COVID, we saw almost a health apartheid, right? So there were the haves and the have-nots. It was India's manufacturing of affordable vaccines that made it available to a very large number of people. But still, there is no systematic process through which affordable and improved healthcare can be made available. So, are there any efforts that through the G20 presidency on say, importance of tech transfer in healthcare, or creating a vaccine fund, or on nutrition, or even as we worry about protein access? I mean, improving technology sharing so that affordable proteins can be made available to people. So, are there efforts and initiatives that India is chairing which can drive those changes over the coming year?
So that's an important question because, COVID really demonstrated the lack of political will amongst leading countries. If there is one example of a lack of coherence of policy across the world that was exposed during COVID, India was the only country which has provided through vaccines to about 140 countries of the world. We've emerged as both the pharmacy of the world, as the vaccine capital of the world. We are the only country which was able to do, through COVID, totally digital, paperless, cashless vaccination for every individual. It has not happened anywhere else in the world. Nowhere else in the world has this happened. I mean, you've seen what has happened to lack of vaccination in many other countries who are our neighbors. But it's important to highlight two aspects. One is that India was able to do things digitally, and we'll talk about that digital transformation of India, which has been an amazing story. And we used that very effectively during COVID. And secondly, no other country could provide vaccine help to other countries as we did this. One of the key things is that this is not the end of a pandemic. You'll have several other pandemics arising because of this linkage with animals, this linkage with plants, this linkage. So that's why the Prime Minister has talked about a One Health policy. That is, animals, plants, humans are all interlinked in this. And that is why this whole philosophy of one earth, one family, one future, that is that we are all part of one cosmos. And it's very important to do this because you may have different ideologies, you may have different political systems, but we all emerge from one cosmic web. And therefore, one of the things which has been done on the health track is to create a fund which will be housed in the World Bank so that in future crisis, future pandemic, the world can access that fund. Now, that fund can then be utilized to push for new innovations, that can be used to push for the global south, that can be used to do vaccinations and many other crisis situations. And that fund, which will be housed in the World Bank, needs to be supplemented. It needs a much more effort, which we'll push through during our presidency.
Thank you. And so changing tack a bit and moving to, you mentioned the digital economy, and we'll come to that as to what India offers in terms of a technology stack, which I think will be much cheaper than even what the developed world has. But on crypto assets, right? So it has been a fad in the developed world. It is now sort of that fad is sort of fading away for a while. But for many in the developing world, it is actually a big problem because these are creating challenges to state, right? The state authority. So in many countries, and I'll not name them, but the crypto assets are used for cross-border trade. They have lost control of their own currencies. And this is one classic example where you need global coordination, right? Just one country doing it is not going to suffice. So are there any initiatives that India is taking, or is there afoot in the G20 to improve this level of coordination so that they are much better regulated?
Yeah. So Neelkanth, it's important that, when you talk about crypto, to understand that the underlying technology is blockchain, which is a very solid technology. So blockchain technology exists, and as long as that technology is very solid, you will have these instances in future as well. And that's why the Prime Minister has repeatedly said that India alone cannot set the rules. If you set the rules here, you'll have young entrepreneurs, they'll go to Singapore, they'll go to Dubai, there'll be flight of capital. So you need global rules. You need everybody to follow the same principles and the same laws. And the Financial Stability Board has done some work around that. I think the IMF has been mandated to do more work on that, and that will be discussed and debated, which you will see a lot of that happening during our presidency. We'll be able to see that through, so that the world has one simple principles across cryptos, because, rightly so, the Reserve Bank of India and the government have issues with this, now that the digital currency of RBI will come out. But the challenge is that you need global rules and regulations for that, which IMF has been mandated to bring out.
Understood. And another issue with global finance is to do with this, dependence on the dollar. And this is, I don't think, in anyone's individual control, but for emerging markets and even frontier markets, we have seen this cycle of famine and feast. So you see 1 or 2 years of very easy money, and then suddenly everything just tightens up. So as you said, many frontier markets are actually already in recession, and caused mainly by this sudden shortage of dollars. Even in India, and I don't know if you're aware, Indian corporates issued $21 billion of dollar bonds in CY21. In the last 12 months, it's $1 billion. And this is in all of Africa, I'm told, in the first half this year, there's going to be $0 bond issuance. And IMF, World Bank are designed for solving crises. So if you get into trouble, you go with a begging bowl, right? But should we even wait for that to happen? Because even a growth headwind pushes people into poverty, right? So in many of these countries. So are there any efforts afoot that allow for better control of cross-border flows of capital, of creating funds which can support economies even before they start getting bankrupted?
So first of all, there are two basic principles which I think we must accept, that right now the reserve currency of the world is the dollar. Unless you change that, dollar is the reserve currency. The second thing, we must understand that we are in a globalized world. And you have to be an integral part of this globalized world. You have to be an integral part of the supply chain. If you are not, you will lose out the race to be a global player. Also we must understand that a country like China could grow at a scorching pace of 11 to 12% per year, year after year, and lifted about 500 million people above the poverty line with the same reserve currency. So let's not blame everything. I think let's try and understand that India needs to grow at 10 to 11. We are growing at about 7%. We are very happy with that. Our ambition should be much bigger. We need to grow at 9 to 10% per annum year after year for 3 decades. That's the challenge, irrespective of what's happening in the world. You will have cycles of growth, you will have cycles of decline. But don't blame everything on dollar being the reserve currency. We need to accelerate the pace of our growth. We need to carry out much, the government has pushed for a lot of transformation, but a lot of radical reforms. I think we just need to keep accelerating that in the years to come.
Understood.
See, I really feel that the stars are aligned in favor of India. You can never have better demographics. Our pace of digitization has been just incredible. It's unbelievable what India has achieved. Every Indian has a digital identity. Every Indian has his bank account linked to his digital identity. Every Indian uses his mobile as a bank today. Imagine 400 million people in the world do not have a digital identity. 250 million people don't even have a bank account. 133 countries in the world do not have a fast payment system. This is the opportunity for India. You will never get an opportunity for India like this. We have done everything to build the building blocks in the last few years. I mean, we did CoWIN, we have the Digi Locker, we have created education digitally through, Diksha and Swayam. A lot of work has been done. Now you just need to accelerate the pace of going digital and going green. So I think that is the way to go.
And in many ways, the G20 presidency is also an opportunity for India to showcase to the world what it has achieved. Yeah. So I was very happy to hear that there are 50 cities which will host G20 events. Could you just elaborate a bit on that, on the philosophy and the thinking behind it?
Yeah. So, while we are doing the G20, there are 3 things. One is that when we host it, while we are looking at the global agenda, we also have the Indian narrative. And the Indian narrative is on several things. One is the digital story of India, which is very distinct from the big tech model of what, if you look at all the innovation, all the disruption that has taken place in the last 2 decades, has taken on the back of what Google, the tech companies, the Google, Microsoft, Apple or Tencent or Alibaba have done. But they have owned the citizens' data. In India's case, we didn't do this. The Europe created another model, which is the GDPR model. But they went for privacy at the cost of innovation. In India, what we did, we created the public tracks. The tracks were owned by the public. UPI is owned by NPCI, which is owned by the banks, on top of which we allowed fast payment. So India is the only country in the world where PhonePe competes with Google, WhatsApp competes with WhatsApp, competes with Paytm. Everybody is competing. We have 40 apps which are competing with each other. So then payment took place. Then you had another set of startups which started doing cashless digital lending like MobiQuick, lending, Pine Labs, etc. Then you had another set of startups. These are all unicorns today. They started doing cashless, paperless, digital wealth management like Zerodha. I mean, Zerodha is an amazing story. And then you had another set of startups which started doing insurance. Insurance used to take a long time in India. Look at Go Digit, look at Acco. They're all doing cashless, paperless on mobile. It's all on the mobile, on the go. You are doing insurance, you are doing wealth management, you are doing credit lending, all on the go on your mobile. So that's the brilliance of what India has done. Now that is a model which India needs to take across the world. That is the big India narrative. The other big India narrative is what we achieved during COVID. We became the vaccine capital, we became the pharmacy capital, we did the CoWIN, we provided insurance to 500 million people of India. 500 million people is more than the population of Europe and America put together. We've provided health insurance. You can be living in Kerala, going to Bihar, you can carry your insurance. Now these are stories not talked about in the elite circles of Bombay, because you people are just caught up in the day-to-day fancy lives of living here, but these are big transformational stories of the world. What India has achieved is absolutely phenomenal in many of these technological stories. These are narratives which India needs to plug in during its G20 presidency. And that is why 2 things that India is doing is that the digital story, the health story, the third thing which we are doing is the millet story. And that's very important because many of us do not realize that 90% of our water is going into agriculture production. When we export basmati rice, we are not exporting basmati rice, we are exporting virtual water. And that's why we are pushing, the Prime Minister is personally pushing for millets. In every meal we are giving millets. We are hosting 215 events in every single city of India. 56 cities of India means you've got an opportunity to transform these 56 cities. Drainage, sewage, solid waste. It's for the local governments to do that. It's an opportunity to push for travel and tourism. It's an opportunity. Travel and tourism is what? A 400 billion market. You own just 3%. You can attract the whole world. It's an opportunity to push for your culture. It's an opportunity to push for your handicrafts. All these are 600 million, 700 million markets. Instead of importers of all this, you should become the biggest exporters thanks to G20. This is the biggest opportunity India has got.
Totally. And just to add another facet to, I think all of them are very, very valid points and exciting opportunities. But if we have to grow faster, right? And this is an example I use, say, for UP. UP wants to go from $250 billion to $1 trillion of GDP. And what I was telling some of the officials there was that if you want to add $750 billion of GDP at an ICOR of 4, you'll need $3 trillion of investment. Now, if you want to do it in 8 years, that's a massive run rate. Neither do you have the capital, nor does the central government have the capital. So you'll need foreign capital. So is this also an opportunity? Are there targets? Are there objectives to convince multinationals to use India as an export base, India as a provision base for services during the G20?
So let me first say that there is no shortage of capital in the world. Do you agree with me as an economist?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And there's no shortage of capital in the world. There's a scarcity of well-structured good projects which are de-risked. If you have de-risked projects, you will attract capital from all over the world. What India should really be doing is to de-risk, structure projects and attract the best capital in the world, which is what India has been doing for the last few years. And that is why in some of these areas, the other big thing about when you talked about UP, it's important to understand that many of these, and it's a challenge because it's very important that UP, Chhattisgarh, all these people, or some of these states now putting ambition before them, that they're saying that they want to reach 1 trillion, or big goals. It's very important to understand that will not happen if our mindset, nowhere in the world does the agriculture sector employ 42% of your population. So you have low paid wages, you have migrant workers. I mean, in Kerala, I find, Kerala is my cadre. Kerala, UP has now invaded Kerala. So you need to urbanize. The fastest way to grow is good urbanization. In UP, look at Gautam Budh Nagar, which is Noida and Greater Noida. Two cities which UP government made in the last 2 decades. The GDP of Gautam Budh Nagar, that is Noida and Greater Noida, is 17x of its second city, which is Kanpur. 17x. So the way forward is you should urbanize, you should manufacture. And manufacturing and urbanization will give you better quality job. And you have an opportunity. India has the biggest opportunity of doing sustainable urbanization. Good quality urbanization, not haphazard urbanization that has happened in Bombay. You need very sustainable urbanization which can create a very good quality of life for its citizens.
Got it. 2 more questions and then I'll open up for audience Q&A. The first is to do with global trade, right? So one of the things that you earlier mentioned was a point of crisis was also that global trade is now slowing. And some of it is just cyclical, but some of it is also because of trade barriers. In fact, the US Inflation Reduction Act has actually created a lot of problems in Europe, in Korea, in Japan. There's a lot of opposition. Unfortunately, even the WTO is not a forum that they can go to because it's effectively controlled by the US. Is there something that the G20 or India's presidency of the G20 this year is looking at in order to reduce the damage that something like this can do to the world as a whole? Because if you have these trade barriers coming up, even the technology access, right? So it is now, whether it is required or not is a different question, but technology being seen as a dual use, like semiconductors being seen as dual use technology, restricting access means that you could see 2 parallel streams, and then countries that are not one of those 2 great powers have to choose between them. So how does the G20 and India's presidency of that try to at least address these issues or set a forum where these don't create as much damage as they can?
So I think all of you are great believers in free trade. You are great believers in laissez-faire. Let me first tell you that, when Europe, America, and UK in particular were growing and expanding, they were the biggest protectionist powers. They were the biggest protectionist powers. And the Inflation Reduction Act, which has been drafted by the United States of America now, is the biggest piece of protectionist act ever written in the history of mankind. What it says is that I will subsidize green hydrogen produced in the United States of America to an extent of $3 per kilogram. That one act has brought every green hydrogen project from Australia to India to Korea to a standstill, because you're saying the cost of production of green hydrogen, because India is climatically blessed, and India does not face a competition with China on climate conditions. The cost of production here is $4.5.
Totally agree. Yeah.
In United States, it's $7.5. They say that I'll subsidize you to, even if it is uncompetitive, even if it is commercially unviable, I'll subsidize you to an extent of $3. That is so US needs to find a way out for its trusted partners, particularly Quad, like it has found a way out for Canada, so that Australia, India can be the low-cost producer and supply to the United States of America. That's important. That's very important. Number two, it's important to understand that the world is moving away from the global supply chains are in a state of flux, in a huge state of flux. The global supply chains are moving away, and a good example of what is happening is what Apple is doing in India right now. It's slowly putting its manufacturing into India. We are trying to help them to accelerate it further by component manufacturing in India. The new investments are not, many economists talk about decoupling. There's no such thing as decoupling. There's a complete monopolization. Because if you look at the top 20 companies of the United States, Cisco, Qualcomm, Apple, almost 95% of the production is in one country. 95%. So you need to diversify simply because if look at Taiwan, for instance. Taiwan accounts for 42% of the chip production. Tomorrow something happens with the One China policy, China and Taiwan, you'll have sanctions from all over the world. That means from defense to mobility to electronic to every single industry of the world coming to a standstill. And that is why you need the whole world will come to a standstill. And that's why you need diversification, you need risk allocation across the world, and that is critical. So new investments are not happening, but the past investments still remain. That needs to be worked at.
Thanks, and I'll end with a question, because you have here the who's who of the financial capital here. Clearly, India's presidency of the G20 is also an opportunity for the Indian business voice, the Indian concerns of Indian businesses, the financial world, to be heard, to get a hearing and set the agenda for the world. How would you suggest that they engage in this process during India's presidency and thereafter?
So we have a very active Business 20, which is Mr. Chandrasekhar of Tata Sons is the chairman of that. They have put together 7 different committees which are driving this. CII is part of that. So there are many of these initiatives like climate action, education, health, social sector. Many of these areas are involved. If anybody is keen to be actively associated, just get in touch with CII or let me know. I'll talk to them. We'll be very happy to get that driven. There's a big opportunity, and the Business 20 recommendations play a very, very critical role into the final leaders' communique.
Understood. The B20 groups are actually quite active. I'm also part of one of them. So if you have ideas, do please pass along. I still have a few questions, but I realize I've run out of my time. So we have 20 minutes of audience Q&A now. Can you give the mic to the gentleman, please?
Thank you, sir. I admire your enthusiasm and echo your thoughts. And Mr. Mishra, that the world is, a recession is looming. So my question, sir, is, India is a Vishwa Guru in spirituality, as our Honorable PM has said. But economically, it needs to get there. Can this G20 presidency of India, we used to galvanize India because India can grow, I think 12% is nothing. We can grow 25%. There's a infrastructure in ports, airports. There's so much congestion in airports, and that's just one. Railways. We can grow and overtake China. We should have an aim to make India a developed economy per capita wise by any X number of years. And you have very nicely prepared an excellent document to operationalize this. India at 75 in September 2018. If that can be operationalized, I'm sure we can get there. Your comments, and you have experience when you made that campaign of God's own country for Kerala. Kerala was a gone state, but it boomed after that. Sorry for this thing. Thank you.
No. So in fact, let me reciprocate saying that I love your enthusiasm. You have much greater enthusiasm than I have. So, I mean, I've never seen this kind of energy in Bombay before. So, I entirely agree with you that we need to grow at high rates. This needs to be sustained. That is what the Prime Minister's objective is, to make India a developed country by 2047. Now, this would require, actually, Government of India has done a lot of things. It's carried out very major structural reforms of GST, IBC, RERA, lowered the corporate taxes, vast range of reforms, digitization. So I really think the central government has really set the pace of growth. Now it's really the states. You need about 14, 15 states to grow at double digit for a long period of time. And that is really the key to India's growth story. Much of the action is now in the states. And secondly, my view is that a lot of states on the eastern part of India needs to become a very instrumental part of this growth story. Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Rajasthan, all must grow as a part of this India growth story. They are the mineral-rich states of India. If they grow, then India's story will be a phenomenal story. And that is very important. And the second thing is very important that growth with equity, which Prime Minister has been focusing on, that is, how do we improve, learning outcomes, how do we improve health outcomes, how do we do better nutrition. All these things, a lot of work by the central government has been done, but the states really need to put their act together. You need about 10, 12 champion states of India.
If I may, Mr. Kant. Always so invigorating listening to you, so thank you for your comments. I have two questions. The G20 presidency that we've taken over comes with the background of a fairly polarized world. You have the Russia-Ukraine war going on, which certainly puts the attention of some of the G20 nations into that. So, in this fractious situation, despite the fact that we have a great leadership at our command with Prime Minister Modi and, of course, you as running this from India's side, how do you see your task as daunting in terms of getting a consensus on some of the key issues that you've just tabled that you would be sort of looking at? The second question is, this is a great opportunity for India to lead the global south, to be sitting on the high table from here onwards. When most of the regulations were framed way back post 1945-47, starting from Bretton Woods, it was a transatlantic nations that had the gravitas because the contribution of the other economies was pretty low. How do you see India taking the lead along with the global south in planting its flag so that from here on, as part of the way the regulatory framework, the global regulatory framework is developed, that we will be on the high table to determine and not be led by just the transatlantic world?
I think two very important questions. The first one is about the geopolitics of the world. And, last year, Indonesia faced this challenge in a very big way, because our argument always has been that G20 is a body for economic growth, for financial progress. It should not get issues get into issues of war. That's an issue which has to be discussed in the United Nations Security Council. That's the forum for it. When we said this in Indonesia, the European countries all said that you are saying this, but the war is having a very severe impact on Europe, on fuel, food, fertilizer, on all these issues, and therefore the economy of Europe is getting impacted, and therefore war has a direct impact on economy, and therefore G20 must discuss it. So for 15 ministerial meetings, there was a deadlock, nothing came out. Nothing came out in 15 ministerial meetings, and actually Indonesia's G20 presidency was, many people said will not work out, it will not survive, but India, and in the Sherpa, final round of Sherpa meeting, India and Brazil played a very key role. The emerging markets got together and they said that no, this has to succeed. And actually we convinced the developed world, the G7, that we should go by the UN Security Council resolution. And therefore the Sherpa para, the preamble to the entire document, the communique of the leaders, was drafted on the basis of the Security Council resolution condemning war, condemning all that, and giving the voting pattern also. So I think that is one solution we found at that point of time, and I think that solution still, we should try and continue with that. We don't know how the geopolitics will shape up in the winter or the post-winter, or how protracted or how long will the war be. But we should continue to do this so that other impact on other issues of the world, economic growth, education, health, is not impacted because of that. So that is what we will continue to do. The second question that you had was about the voice of the South. So we are very clear that India will be the voice of the South, very strongly be the voice of the South, particularly in the context of the fact that several countries are facing a debt crisis in the South. Prime Minister has just interacted with 125 leaders. A lot of those lessons we've incorporated while taking our issue notes, our different working groups, we'll take them forward. Important thing is that there needs to be a far greater sharing of experience between the global South itself and the developed world and the South itself, like Neelkanth was saying, how we can, our model of digital transformation, how we can make these countries benefit from it, is a unique example of what we can do. So many of these things, but definitely India will be the voice of the global South. That's the Prime Minister has made it very clear.
Sir, congratulations on G20. You spoke a lot about green India, green energy, but as you know that India is highly dependent on thermal power. Most of our power comes from thermal because obviously our usage is post-sunset. So how do you see that going? How does it play out in your scheme of things going forward? And what are your thoughts about thermal versus green from an India perspective?
So my view on that is very simple, that you got to make renewables and you got to make green hydrogen cheaper than thermal. India is the only country which has the possibility to do this because in no other country has the climatic condition. The only other country which has a similar climatic condition is Saudi Arabia, which is full of fossil fuel, and therefore it will continue to concentrate on fossil fuel. India is climatically truly blessed, and therefore it should accelerate the pace of use renewable to crack water, produce green hydrogen, decarbonize all refineries, all steel. We should become the world's biggest producer of green steel, green fertilizer. We should be an exporter of green hydrogen in its liquid form, ammonia, to the world. We have the opportunity to be the lowest cost producer of green hydrogen to the world. That is, be the producer, be the exporter, be the biggest manufacturer of electrolyzer. This opportunity is unparalleled for India. Unparalleled for India. The world is going through a flux in the energy world. All stars are aligned in favor of India. India can be unstoppable in the field of green hydrogen. And you have top-class entrepreneurship, both the bigger companies and young startups. Many of these young companies which have done phenomenal work in renewables and energy, they are like cowboys, so they are phenomenal entrepreneurs.
Any other questions? Okay, there are two hands at the back. Maybe Mr. Shah there. Can you pass the mic to him, please?
Hello.
Oh, you have one here. Okay. We'll come to you after this. Yeah.
Evening to both of you. In fact, just extending to that point, I really want to know, I mean, when we talk about these structured finance options, for some people, they might think that it becomes available to the big guys, and in times of these crises, they are the ones who, with the deeper pockets, they'll survive, they will be able to refinance. How do we become more inclusive, not only in terms of a global economy, which is trying to be a little localized, but also try to bring in that participation from the bottom up, so that everybody becomes a contributor to the economy? And I truly believe that's where the growth will come from.
So I'm a believer that the only way to accelerate this is through technological transformation, through digital transformation. I mean, India has been able to change the lives of its citizens. I mean, you go to a village seller, you go to anybody in a tier 2, tier 3 city, they're all using their mobiles to do digital. Many of them are using technology, this Diksha platform. I went to Nandurbar, which is a tribal district of Maharashtra. The tribal children were all studying Diksha through one mobile on the screen. The best tutorials are coming through Diksha portal, which has been unparalleled what has happened in India through technology. The only way to be able to do that is through technology. Technology will be the biggest transformational story of the world.
And how do the smaller companies become, how do they get access to the funds?
So once you do credit enhancement, then you are not doing direct lending. You see, the challenge of World Bank is they do direct lending to, say for instance, there's a crisis in Sri Lanka, IMF does direct lending to them. The global debt crisis, let me dwell a little bit, that the challenge is in these 75 countries today, that the initial debt in many of these countries were given by these, there's the Paris Pact, because they were given by France. A lot of lending was done by France. So there's a Paris Pact. And there's a Paris Club which looks at lending. Then there is lending by IMF. Then there's lending by private sector. And in recent times, China has done a lot of lending. So you can't solve this. What IMF is saying is that I am willing to do a package for this country. But unless China doesn't sit on the table, you can't have a pact. My package will go to settle China's dues. So you need private sector, you need everybody together. So that's important. The other point is that MEGA, which is a World Bank instrument, its creation of World Bank should be used more effectively to do a lot of lending to MSMEs, etc., to the private sector, so that it becomes far more inclusive.
And just to add to that what Mr. Kant said, so at the B20, one of the task forces is actually looking into this issue of financing for MSMEs because it's a global problem. I think affordable lending or efficient lending to MSMEs is a global problem. And what can be best practices, what should be the methodologies, using some of the global...
So there's a lot of lessons from India itself, this account aggregator model which India has built up, which RBI is, which empowers, the data empowerment is with the citizens, but yet you are using it to do credit lending based on past history.
So three questions, and then I think we'll have to close. So one here, one right at the back, yes, Mr. Shah there, who's raised his hand, and the third one here. And then we'll see if we still have time left. If Inakshi allows us, we can continue.
Yes, my question is, what does India need to do to improve its access to rare earth elements to speed up the renewable energy transition?
Again, an important question about rare earth, because you need minerals, you need nickel, cobalt, all that for battery manufacturing. and battery you need for storage. If you go the green hydrogen route, then you don't need only two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and four-wheelers need battery storage. But you need electric mobility needs battery storage. That would require us to do tie-ups with other countries to get that. But let me also tell you that in a battery, these raw materials are just about 10 to 12% of the total value addition. 85% of the value addition can still be done in India without these. You need these components, they are important, but they are just, there's another study by Rocky Mountain Institute and Niti Aayog which shows that it's just 15% of the total value add. And, but there's no shortage. You know, many people feel that there's a shortage. There's no shortage of nickel cobalt in the world today, right now.
Yes, the next question there. Do you have a mic yet?
So thank you so
it's
much.
Okay. So maybe we can.
Thank you so much for the insights. It was very interesting to hear you say that I think 12 or 13 states will have to grow at double digits, and that is how India will probably grow at double digits for a long time to come. Do you see any broad overarching themes or any sectors which will lead or spearhead this growth, or do you think a lot of sectors will contribute small percentages to this growth?
No, I'm very clear. First is that growth will have to come from moving away from agriculture to urbanization. You have to take out a vast segment of your population in agriculture, which is low paid, into urbanization. Number two, get into all sunrise areas of growth. If you want to grow at rapid pace, you have to get into electronic manufacturing. You need to get into electric mobility. You need to get into green hydrogen. You need to get into a range of cutting-edge technologies. That's where the real value will be. The real growth in many of these areas will give you the massive pace of growth for exports and becoming a center for production and exports. That's what all these countries, whether you look at Japan, Korea, China, all did. They all got into sunrise areas of growth. Without doing that sunrise areas of growth, you need to push for textiles, food processing to ensure that jobs are there. But many of these sunrise areas will give you the pace of growth because the value is huge. Many of us do not realize this, but last year, in value terms, the total amount of electronic goods sold are more than the total amount of vehicles value. In value terms, is more than the total amount of automobiles. So you need to become the champion of two-wheelers. You need to become the champion of electric vehicles. You need to see that your buses go electrical or green hydrogen. You need to become a champion in renewables. You need to become a champion of green hydrogen. You need to become a champion of battery storage. Without that, India can't grow. You've digitized your economy, but you need to go green in a very big way in many of these areas. That's where the real value and money will not flow if you will not be going green. Banks will not lend you. Private companies will not lend you.
Totally. One final question.
Thank you so much for your thoughts and your words. As the last question, I guess I have the last word from the audience point of view. You certainly have the last word from your point of view. I want to talk about the digital transformation view. Yeah, I just want to talk about the digital transformation. One of the things that I think is great about India is what we've been able to achieve in the world of financial inclusion, right? Just in terms of how the path has moved from the Jan Dhan Yojana, opening of the 430 million bank accounts, to getting rails like AEPS, etc., Aadhaar-enabled payment systems, etc., in the country. Now, that's a great success story for sure, right? The question I have really is about, while we are creating all these ecosystems, we are getting more people in the financial inclusion. It's a model that should be replicated in most developing economies. But we haven't heard of too many success stories in the world trying to emulate what India has been able to do, whether it's the India stack, whether it's the UPI, whether it's all the other rails. That, when you look at countries like Brazil, etc., it just seems very intuitive that those countries could probably benefit from similar solutions and similar structures. India hasn't led the path in trying to bring these out that we know of, right? And I'm sure that's one of the things the G20 should try and achieve. Bring those success stories out, at least to the other developing economies, so you can actually raise or help raise people from the ground up, right? Even though they may not be Indians, they're different people, but every country can grow, and therefore the world economy can benefit from that, right? That's one point. That's a comment. I'd like your thoughts on that. Secondly, you spoke about financing and arranging the World Bank having a large fund and therefore arranging a unique and differentiated forms of financing. How does that translate all the way down to the MSME financing? I know you spoke a little bit about how MSMEs can eventually benefit because we'll have these large structures. But if you really talk about India being a deeply capital-starved economy, even though there's enough capital in the rest of the world, at the ground level, right, and I operate at the ground level, at the village level in my company, we find that there is deep capital starvation sitting out there, right? So when you try and match these two big goals, right, we want to solve the global problem of the World Bank becoming more effective in the way they provide financing, to really taking it all the way down to the MSMEs, where that capital can really be put to use, for capital formation and what have you. How does one think through all of that? So just love your comments on this.
So the first question, let me respond saying that it's not easy to do things. In other countries I'm talking about, because you said taking the model to other countries. Between 2015 and 2018 in India, 55% of the bank accounts opened in the world were opened in India. Every second bank account in the world was opened in India because the Prime Minister took upon himself to get these bank accounts. Every bank was given targets, delivered, chased. Then, post demonetization, when we were doing digital transformation, we did about 100 digital melas in 100 days, trying to get all banks, all startups, everybody together. The push which the government has given to digital payments has been just phenomenal. And that is what led to this. And, this whole strategy of linking up bank accounts to your Aadhaar and then using that and then linking up, doing CoWIN, linking it up with your passport, etc. This huge governance will, the entire will of the Prime Minister and the government has been behind all this. Now, you've created successful models, but to take it to another part of the world, there has to be similar governance there. So first and foremost, that we are willing to give this model. We are not seeing it as a business opportunities. We want to see that other citizens of the world transform. And as I said, if 400 million people do not have a digital identity, we should provide identity. That itself is a challenge. Then they have a bank, they need a bank account. That needs to be linked to the digital identity. Then you need to provide mobiles to be able to do fast payment. All this is the will of the local government, which is very critical. The political leader. What India has demonstrated is that with political leadership you can deliver, and similarly, we are willing to give that know-how, but the world must have this same passion, energy, determination to be able to deliver this digital transformation which India has done. And that is why we do 11x more fast payments than what America and Europe do together. Many of us don't know this. 11x payments of what America and Europe do, we do 3.5x of what China does in fast payments. So it's not an easy job. But all these slew of products that we have we can put in a cloud, in a box, and give it to the other countries. That is what the government wants to do. We want to help the developing South, so we are very willing to do that. And your second question about financing. So the challenge there is that India needs, if you have to grow at high rates, you need large pools of money to flow in. Now, large pool of funds means that you will get money in dollar terms. Now, dollar terms means that you need hedging instruments. Your hedging instruments are for short periods, 2 years. You need hedging instruments of 25, 30 years to be able to do large projects, to be able to lend to MSMEs or infrastructure or many other things. That is what needs to be structured by international financial systems, which will enable India to accelerate the pace of SDG, accelerate the pace of climate, accelerate the pace of transformation of MSMEs. And that long-term hedging instruments of 25, 30 years is still not available fully. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Kant. Just an addition to the answer to the first question. In addition to the will of the government, there's also I think there are vested interests in every economy. Think about the payment service providers in Brazil, for example, who get 3 to 4% every time they process a dollar. What incentives they have in allowing something like this to happen. So thank you. So on that count,
Government of India is fully determined and keen to help all the developing countries of the South with its digital public infrastructure model, which it has built up across sectors.
Thank you, Mr. Kant, for patiently answering all our questions. It has been a very enjoyable and very educative discussion for all of us. So on behalf of the audience, we would like to thank you for it. Oh, there is one last question. Okay. Yeah, please. Yeah, of course.
I have a question about our legal system because you said that we are growing, we can grow at 9 to 10 or even 10 to 11%, and that is what is our target. And we are doing great, we are going at great pace for digitalization and also for infrastructure development. But we also need a lot of capital inflows to sustain that or to achieve that. But when it comes to our legal system or our justice delivery system, we are way behind. And how are we going to achieve the confidence of all the investors whom you want to bring all that money in India? Because our legal and justice delivery system is still, I would say, quite inefficient, with court cases lying for 20 years and 30 years. And do you think there is something the government is doing on that front?
Let me respond.
Sure.
So, first and foremost, G20 doesn't provide a solution to all the problems of India. आप अपनी सड़क साफ ना कहो, आप कहो G20 आके साफ कर देगा. ये कैसे हो सकता है भैया? आप ड्रेनेज नहीं साफ करो, आप कहो G20 कंट्रीज आके साफ कर देंगी आपके लिए. ऐसे नहीं होगा. वी हैव टू पुट आवर ओन हाउस इन ऑर्डर. देयर आर नंबर ऑफ चैलेंजेस ऑफ इंडिया व्हिच इंडिया हैज टू सॉल्व. नो, द वर्ल्ड कैन नॉट कम एंड सॉल्व योर लीगल प्रॉब्लम्स ऑफ इंडिया. इंडिया हैज टू फाइंड सॉल्यूशंस फॉर इट्स ओन प्रॉब्लम्स. So I think it's very important to understand that there are certain issues which have an international dimension, which require G20, where there are global issues, but there are internal issues for which India has to find solution itself.
Okay, one last and final question. Towards the back. Oh, Mr. Behram. Oh, there he is. Okay. Okay. So thank you.